Good morning! Maayong buntag, magandang umaga. We are already in our fourth session for those who were able to join us since the beginning of our PLDT Infoteach webinar series, gearing up for the new normal in teaching and learning in partnership with UP Open University. I'm Kat Diaz de Rivera, head of the PLDT Community Relations Division, and I'll be your moderator for today. All right, to our teachers and fellow parents here online from NCR, do I hear a clap? One, two, 6,000 smiles and claps. How about our viewers in Luzon? 1,000 claps. Visayas. I hear also 1,000 claps in Mindanao. Hello, everybody. Hello. We have already 7,000 participants joining us here today. To our happy and beautiful, handsome participants, are you ready? Before we proceed with our main session and hear from our guests and resource speakers, just for your appreciation, and I'm sure our student graduates of the PLDT InfoTeach outreach program are familiar and would be able to relate to this. Allow me to just briefly share with you a very short backgrounder. PLDT and UPOU have a long-standing relationship through our 16-year-strong PLDT InfoTeach outreach program. As PLDT Community Relations flagship educational program, it champions digital literacy by empowering public high school students and elementary and high school teachers coming from school-based and barangay-based levels to pursue lifelong digital learning. Launched in 2004, the PLDT InfoTeach outreach program has since produced over 30,000 graduates coming from different partner schools nationwide in partnership with Netopia. The PLDT InfoTeach outreach program is an ongoing commitment to promote digital lifelong learning. Amid the pandemic, we continue to empower you, our teachers and students, by providing digital capabilities. In a way, we hope that our webinar series today will help pave the way for you, our teachers, fellow parents, and students alike to traverse digital learning with the utmost confidence, yung bilib sa sarili. We hope this helps you utilize online learning opportunities as well as digital solutions and tools. So, allow me to give you an overview of how our webinar series will look like. So, paano ba? We have organized our topics into 4 segments. First, of course, are for our teachers, our learners, parents, and guardians, and for everybody. We are privileged to have UPOU's Chancellor Dr. Melinda Baldalaria as our lead speaker, resource speaker, and together with our guest schools division superintendents from selected schools who will provide their side of concerns, inputs, and share practical tips to fellow teachers on how best to implement the blended learning system. There will be several topics that will be discussed, which is up and open for everybody to key in their questions, comments, and inputs via our chat system in the UPOU Network's Facebook and the chat box in the UPOU website. For the teacher segment, first 2 sessions of which we already covered. Up next is on the assessment of online engagement tools, which is what we will be discussing today, and supporting online learners this August 10, this Monday na po. On the other hand, students were also given an online course on preparing to be an online learner, which we covered the other day. Also, a session on cybersecurity will be available to the public this August 14. Moreover, parents are also given a special webinar and will be on how to support their children as online learners, and this will happen on August 18. At the same time, our local government unit representatives from the pre-selected school areas were also invited to join the webinar series this August 12 because PLDT recognizes the place in ensuring that the education sector can transition to digital learning with ease. This special webinar session is included for partner LGUs as they share some of their best practices in preparation for the school year. All right. On the issuance of certificates, as shown here on screen, you may scan the QR code or go automatically sent to those who completed their evaluation forms and were able to answer 7 out of 10 questions correctly. Kindly ensure to input the correct spelling of your name as well. Please don't forget to evaluate this event and answer the questions correctly. The online evaluation form will start receiving responses right after this event and will be available within the next 6 hours. While we are getting a number of concerns regarding access to our evaluation link, please be advised that if you find it hard to access the site within the first 3 hours due to internet traffic, it would be a good option to access it during the last 3 hours, which is around 3 to 6 p.m. today. All right, now that you have a grasp of what's in store today, before I give the floor to our guest to share her thoughts about our fourth topic, we learned that through online learning engagement, it is essential to make your learners feel connected and make them embrace the learning journey. We get to feel the nature of a face to face learning in a digital setting. Today, we will learn about assessment, how we can better understand the effectiveness of online learning in our new digital classroom. Here with us on standby are SDS from the Division of Pangasinan, Dr. Sheila Marie de Los Angeles Primicias, CESU 6, who is characterized by her passion and commitment to bring the school's Division Office 1 Pangasinan into greater heights. She puts premium to innovating learning resources, enriching the potentials of educators to make the teaching learning environment ideal for teachers and learners, and to realize the battle cry for the new normal education, there's no learner will be left behind. A woman of substance, influence, and integrity, the OIC Schools Division Superintendent of SDO1 Pangasinan, who will share some of the challenges in assessment given the current situation that our educators are facing. Let's give our warm welcome to Dr. Sheila. Dr. Sheila.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to all the viewers. And I'm humbled that we are invited and I'm honored to join this webinar. And I started my journey as superintendent last September 18, 2019, barely 10 months. And to give you a brief trivia on Pangasinan Division 1, we have about 14,794 teaching and non-teaching personnel, around 345,951 learners. We have about 659 schools and 22 municipalities. And it's really quite a challenging job to handle a large division, a big division, especially in this new normal. And I want to share to you some of the best practices of our division in the preparation of the new normal. Actually, we started the uh, creation of the COVID-19 task force. Sila po yung gagabay para sa pulisiya na ibababa sa mga schools. And of course, for the implementation of our learning continuity plan, and the different health protocols that the school should follow, and of course, other matters related to COVID-19. So we created this task force. Second is we issued also a comprehensive readiness school checklist on the new normal to all schools so that they will know on what to prepare and how to prepare the different uh, uh, preparations for the school readiness comes August 24. And to monitor the preparations of our schools, we have also created a website in all schools, the 659 schools that I mentioned. All schools now have their website. And in addition to that, we have also the health profiling of teachers. We have to consider also who are teachers who are physically fit and teachers who are considered to be a work from home. Ito po yung tinatawag natin those teachers who are pregnant, senior citizens, and with vulnerable disease. Uh, and we have also the skeleton workforce. In addition also to that, we have also mapped our teachers and learners as to their readiness to instructions, to the different gadgets, and of course, we have also mapped the readiness of the community as to their internet connectivity, and we have also set the readiness of parents and students of the different learning modalities that we are offering here in SDO1 Pangasinan. So in our division, we are offering the 5 learning modalities. On the online learning modality, we have the synchronous and the asynchronous learning modalities. So yan po ang ino-offer ng SDO1 Pangasinan. Second, we have the modular distance learning modality. We have the printed and the digital learning modality. And of course, we have the learn from home or the homeschooling. And we are now into entering into uh, the TV and radio modality for our learners. So with the 5 learning modalities plus the radio and TV, I hope we are all set for SDO1 Pangasinan to be ready by August 24. And we'll make it a point that our battle cry, that no learner will be left behind, we will address the issues and concerns, and the teachers will be ready as to will be ready teaching as to the readiness of our learners. Kagaya po ng lagi po ng aming sinasabi that we will teach the way our learners want to learn. So, ibibigay po natin yung
No, no, no,
mga
no.
learning modalities na naka-adapt po o nababagay po para sa kanila. Some issues and concerns na nakikita po namin dito, if we have the online learning modality, is yung nga po, it's the internet connectivity. And that is why our solution for this is we are now talking to our LGUs, getting their support so that to get a stronger connectivity, especially in their locality, if it could not be possible in every barangay. So that's what we are asking to our LGU partners. So for the assessment, it will not be a big problem if it is online because there will be a system already that is readily available and it is planned by our IT experts and our curriculum implementation division on how will we do the assessment if we do it online. We are only having a problem for the printed modular distance learning modality. Our concern here is gaano po the retrieval and the retrieval of the printed assessment. It's because ito po yung napansin namin, there are some schools it will take time for the teachers, the parents to get the the modules and activity sheets. At ito pa yung medyo mas mahirap when we retrieve the modules, wala pong sagot. Wala pong sagot ng mga learners. So we are having a problem on that. So that is also a concern. That is why when we have seen that, we shifted to the digital form. Ang ginawa po ng SDO1 Pangasinan is we lend the PC tablets owned by DepEd and the TV to some of the barangays. At iyon po ay ginagamit na ngayon na sa mga schools on their tryout para makita namin if and when the printed modular learning activity will fail, we will have the digital learning activity, the learning modality. So we will cater that in the barangay, and we will offer that in the barangay. So yun po yung nakikita naming solusyon for issues and concern as to the assessment. It will be hard for us in the for the teachers as regards to assessment if we will see on paano ba talaga sinagutan ng mga bata yung mga printed modules na ito. So naghahanda rin po ang kagawaran, ang aming pansangay on how will we address that issue, but it will be a great help if ma-addressan po rin natin dito at maibigay po ang input ng bawat isa. So yun lang po ang nakikita po natin, some issues and concerns. But definitely, we have also the learn from home. So what we are doing now is we started that already last June 1. The learn from home, we have suggested daily activities for our school learners. We started that last June 1 with our kindergarten, elementary, junior high school, and senior high school, which means that we are catering all types of learners. So we have suggested activities already. So nakita namin kasi that since June 1 is the school opening, parang pinaramdam namin sa mga bata na nag-uumpisa na silang mag-aral through the learn from home activities. So ito po yung mga pinaghahandaan po ng aming pansangay. We are getting ready for that. But again, wala pa pong bagong guidelines onto assessment for for school year 2020-21. We are preparing for that at nag-aantay lang po kami. We are waiting for whatever will be the guidelines from our central office. So yeah, with this uh, uh, hindi hindi magiging matagumpay yung aming battle cry that no learner will be left behind if our parents will not cooperate, if the LGU and the stakeholders will not give their full support, and even our community. As I've been saying, that it takes a village to raise a child, and in this time of pandemic, we should heal as one. We should work as one, and that only selfless love can save us now.
All right. I agree. Totally agree with you po, Dr. Sheila. Thank you so much for that very insightful experience that you have shared with us. Kindly stand by, ma'am, for our open forum in a few minutes. To everyone, kindly send us your questions through our UPOU Network's website chat box or through the UPOU Network's Facebook page. Our resource speaker for today, Assistant Professor Anna Katrina T. Marshall, who is a full-time faculty member of the Faculty of Education, UP Open University, where she has handled courses in the Associate in Arts, Bachelor of Education Studies, and in the Diploma and Master of Arts in Language and Literacy Education, LLE programs. She currently serves as the program chair of LLE and the director of the Office of Academic Support and Instructional Services, or OASIS, one of the academic units of UP Open University mandated to assist the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs in the planning and development of UPOU courses and their primary instructional materials. With her discipline focusing on language, education, and communication arts, her research interests and public service work include addressing issues under affect in language learning, social media use in higher education, technology and language learning, intercultural language teaching and learning, among others. Her previous and current research engagements include UPOU's research projects on teaching and learning strategies with tablet computers in selected national high schools and advancing equity and access to higher education through open and distance learning. She provides insights and best tips on how we can better understand the effectiveness of online learning, which would definitely help address some issues and challenges raised by Dr. Sheila a while ago. Let's give our warm welcome and time for Assistant Professor Anna Katrina Marshall. Hi,
Good
Miss
morning.
Kitchay. Good morning po.
Uh, Thank you po for the introduction, Ma'am Kat. No? Good morning, everyone, to all the participants of this webinar series. Thank you for staying with us until the, pang ilan na nga, fourth edition.
Yes.
Now, this time, the focus will be on assessment. As I was listening to Dr. Sheila, I hope some tips and strategies and the tools that I'll be able to share with you based on our experiences in UPOU and based on research will be able to help you as you redesign, continuously redesign and prepare for your next academic year. No? Okay, wait, let me share my screen for I always begin my presentation with context and assumptions, which are the basis for the contents of my presentation. By the way, pala, my presentation is titled Assessment for, of, and as learning in the remote teaching and learning context. Uh, the I'll start my presentation with context and assumptions, and then a sort of refresher because I'm sure it's not new na for teachers out there, the three purposes of assessment. Then I'll end it with the various assessment types and methods and even tools which you can include among your options. And points for considerations in terms of your redesign for your assessment. Since you won't start from scratch anyway, I mean, you have your tools, your army of assessment tools and design from the face-to-face traditional classroom teaching. But because of the situation right now, there is a need for you to review them and reassess, diba? So now, for the context and assumptions. The first one's a given, as also described by Dr. Sheila. Systems are already in place. This is my assumption, and I'm sure it's true for not just for Pangasinan, but all other divisions, school divisions. No, preparations are done and being done about assessment at the various levels. The second assumption and context that I was working on as I prepared this presentation is that assessment is not separated from the other aspects of your course plan or your subject. I'll expound more on this as we go along. Then the third, well, it's a given that the assessment tool you may need to redesign is highly dependent on your discipline, the subject that you're handling, particularly the expected learning outcomes from the subjects or courses you will teach from your curriculum guide. But still, even though the assessment design is highly dependent on your discipline, there are some strategies and tips which could help you uh, as you go along and as you begin the term. Now, with the first, I said a while ago, given naman na the first context and assumption. Now, I'll expound on the second one, which is your assessment should not be separated from the other aspects of your course plan. So here, you might be familiar with this table already or a variation of this table, whichever kind you are following or adhering to. And most probably in the previous seminar, especially in planning for remote teaching and learning context, you were provided with variation or a version of this. You'll see that um, even now in the remote teaching and learning context, and even in and or online teaching and learning, uh, you need to go back to the drawing board. You need to plan or replan or redesign well, and your assessment, it's not different from your the rest of the aspects of your course plan. Diba? You have your schedule, your target week or number of hours, and then you have your module or your unit, your objectives, the topics, resources, activities, and then lastly the assessment. But still, even though it's true then in the face-to-face setting, and even now, you need to ask yourself, given the current limitations as well as opportunities, what do my students, if I'm the teacher and or even a curriculum designer and materials developer, given the current limitations as well as opportunities, what do my students or the students need to learn, and how are they going to show evidence of their outputs which demonstrate the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes they have supposedly gained from next academic year's lessons. So knowledge, skills, and attitudes, hindi naman yan mababago. So kailangan nyo lang tanungin yung mga sarili constantly na alin ba dito yung magiging, through my assessment activities, how will they be able to achieve yung expected natin sa kanila. Essentially, so you ask yourselves, how are my assessment tools related to the other aspects then of the teaching the subject or the course, and implementing still the curriculum. To manage your time well, without sacrificing what's written in the approved curriculum guide, diba? Our learning objectives. We try to uh, balance them all and strategically choose the kinds of topic that we should highlight, we should emphasize, and at the very least, we should just introduce. Because there are really too many topics which we should cover. And because of various factors, we understand that we need to make smart choices as teachers, uh, being the content experts, the facilitators, the mentors. Now, in terms of narrowing down our topics, Bates and Poole recommended that course content be structured in such a way that we avoid overloading our students. And one way that they push for the classification is to just classify your topics into essential, useful, and interesting. Likewise, there's a variation of this, earlier variation, which is from Wiggins and McTee, uh, in which they classified the content topics into those that are worth being familiar with, I mean, for the students, those that are important to know and do, and those that would elicit enduring understanding for the students. This one's from the backward design framework. But that's for narrowing down, or at least trying to uh, find a structure and or prioritize the content. The same question still applies. Shouldn't we restructure our assessment, or shouldn't we think of our assessment design and gauge what should be prioritized? Especially since uh, from the same nested rings na illustration, Wiggins and McTee, the curriculum priorities, the content, the worth being familiar with, important to know and do, and the enduring understanding kinds, they have uh, typical assessments which would match them. No? So for them, for Wiggins and McTigg, usually we do quizzes and tests if we are to, in relation to those topics that are worth being familiar with, and those that are important to know and do. The interesting ones and the useful ones. In the same manner, if we want naman na daw to tap deeper, enduring understanding, and the content is more of in the likes of those important to know and do, we try to do alternative assessments or yung mga mass performance tasks and projects. This one's according to them. This isn't a fixed formula, no? At the end of the day, it will depend on your design, the guide that you're following. and the purpose. But still, it's one framework that we could follow or adhere to. I mentioned yung traditional and alternative assessments. So, let's just have a quick refresher. No? As you know, traditional assessments, they're more conventional. They are your pen and paper tests used to measure what students know. So typically your MCQs, multiple choice questions, true or false, short answer tests. That's on one end of the spectrum. On the other hand, you have your alternative assessments, in which case you have various methods which focus on demonstration and application of knowledge and skills. For example, performance assessment or performance based assessment. You have your portfolio assessment in the form of, well, different assessment tools then through collaborative writing assignments, video presentation, reflection paper, even observation notes and short surveys, and other assessment activities which may maximize the use of peer and self assessment. Uh, all these things, you know this already because they're already, I mean, you've had numerous training about all these before and you have your curriculum guide. No? The question lang is, since we're going back to the drawing board, how are we going to balance them all? Uh, So we go back to our basic steps of assessment. Uh, and this is one generic steps lang no? By Walworth in his study. He presented the generic steps of planning your assessment. Ideally, especially for guided by the OBE framework, we figure out what learners should get out of the instruction. So that's we go back to the goal. What do we want our students to be able to do when they complete our course of study? Uh, so in our replanning or redesigning, balik lang tayo ulit dun. Babalikan natin siya. And then we get the kind of, we decide on the kind of information that we need to get. As teachers, how will we know if they're successful in meeting those goals, diba? So we ask ourselves, how well are our students achieving these goals and what factors influence their learning? Mas this second question on the information, mas ito yung isa sa na-address ng assessment aspect. We are designing activities and assessment. What factors influence their learning? In relation to the third step, in which you have to ask yourselves and find the answers to the question, how can we use the information to improve students' learning? All in all, we need to decide kasi how the students should get from one point to the next stage, to the other point. No? And to balance them all, we're guided by, or we try to be guided by the different purposes of assessment. In the resource, we're thinking classroom assessment with purpose in mind. There are three purposes, three kinds. We have assessment for learning. And why do we assess if that is our purpose? Mainly, we want to determine the next steps in advancing student learning. And then the second kind, we have assessment of learning. At this one, we're most familiar with this one. We want to certify kasi as teachers, we want to certify, we want to get the information and relay that information to others in terms of or concerning students' proficiency in relation to curriculum learning outcomes. And then there's the third kind where we do assessment as learning. Our aim here is to guide and provide opportunities for each student to monitor and critically reflect. Take note, critically reflect on his or her learning and identify the next steps for themselves. Now, there are times, because of various factors within and even outside our control as teachers, we tend to focus on assessment of learning. And then, if we still have, well, if we have the time and opportunity, of course, we do assessment for learning, no? Pero, we tend to forget the assessment as learning aspect, even though we want to address that. Pero given this current scenario that we have, let's do try considering if ways in which we can balance all these three purposes. No? But let's just refresh a bit anong connection yan dun sa different kinds of assessment, these three purposes. So for What we know or classify as formative assessments, that's referred to as assessment for learning. And these are all activities undertaken by teachers and or by students, which provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching learning activities in which they are engaged. This definition is according to Black and William. They're the ones who uh, gave the earliest definition of formative assessments. Uh, Yale University added that they are tools that identify misconceptions, struggles, and learning gaps along the way and assess how to close those gaps. These includes the formative assessments, includes your students assessing themselves, assessing their peers, even the instructor. That through writing, quizzes, conversations, and all the other activities that you typically have. Basta the main point is we want to identify yun nga, misconceptions, struggles, and learning gaps and address them, of course. So that's formative. Now, for summative assessments, they sum up what a learner has achieved at the end of a period relative to the learning aims and the relevant national standards. So this one you know already. These are your scored or graded tests, assignments, performance, and even projects. The period of time, they may vary. Uh, can be the end of the quarter, the grading period, or even a topic. And this is where your planning becomes crucial, given the limitations that we have right now for summative assessment. Then lastly, we have metacognition or assessment as learning. You may agree or may not agree or may disagree with the statement that under this purpose, learning is not just a matter of transferring ideas from someone who is knowledgeable to someone who is not. Sorry, I got distracted by the sound of the chopper. Service ko daw siya. Joke lang. No, so going back again, assessment as learning, it's not simply as teachers, as the content experts, you would want to relate to your students that these are the things that you must know. No, that's not lang the main point of assessment. This involves designing assessment tools which allow students to make sense of information related to prior knowledge and use it for new learning. So sila mismo, they take responsibility in their own learning. So we try to build, as teachers, what do? We try to build their metacognitive skills. We would ideally would want to build critical awareness uh, so that they will be conscious of their own thinking and the way that they study. And crucial to right now, we are not going to be there with them, with our students all the time, diba? Even if the technology will help us do that, it's not going to be realistic and fair, I guess, for you and the students. Uh, so through some of our assessment tools that we design and we will offer online or even remotely, uh, just we need to bear in mind that we just need to train our learners then to make sense of information. So, for example, we provide them with a reading. So, how are they going to read that text? Relate all those information to their prior knowledge, what's familiar to them, and use it for new learning. And then we would want to train them and help them how they will monitor their own learning and then use what they will find out, they will discover, and they will identify from their own monitoring to make adjustments and adaptations and even major changes in the way they would study or think. You know? So that should be reflected in your assessment design. But of course, still, as teachers, you have to provide guided instruction to your students. So, all with all those three assessment purposes considered, uh, I will leave you with this first self-reflection question. In your attempt to reclassify your assessments amidst this challenging period, what will be the proportion, quote unquote, of your assessments in terms of purpose? Will you still? I know, of course, primarily you're guided by your curriculum guide. Pero There are still room for adjustments, I would assume. So, yun nga, paano natin siya i-balance right now? And then in relation to your answer to this self-reflection question, uh, and your curriculum guide, uh, how do you strike a balance then between high stakes and low stakes assessments? High stakes assessments, as most of you probably know, they're linked to significant major decisions about the student's progression, certification of knowledge, skills, or abilities. So yung at the end of the summative assessments, no? At the end of a specific grading period. Or would it be, I will leave you with this thought, will it be more strategic first, right now, given our restrictions, to focus first on low stakes assessment, which are those that do not rely heavily, they do not heavily impact students' final grades or other educational outcomes. But still, they may provide constant checkpoints for your learners. Uh, so yun, yung thoughts natin. No? But uh, after that self-reflection, how are we going to find the balance? Still, what kinds of assessments should we do? Can we do? Well, I don't have the fixed answer to that. But as a strategy, you can gauge the assessment that you will need by referring or going back to the ever reliable Bloom's taxonomy. Diba? You go back to your learning objectives in redesigning your assessment. And you will see from the next slide na just because you're going to do an online quiz, for example, as an online equivalent for a test, a short test, doesn't mean that you're only targeting the lower order thinking skills. So one suggestion in relation to Bloom's taxonomy, no, is was made by Dustin Summy from the University of Central Arkansas. He provided just a few kinds of formative and summative assessments in relation to Bloom's taxonomy. Let's break it down. So for the first level, remembering level, uh, he offered that you can use just games or simple checklists and even automated self-tests. So yung mga automated quizzes, uh, that's what he said na you can do. But on the other end, kapag if it's summative assessment and you're just targeting the remembering stage or level, you can still use MC, multiple choice questions and short answer tests or exams, and all these resource lists, word clouds. Pero of course, there are a lot, you know. And you have, as teachers, you have, for sure, you have more than this one. And then for understanding, you can do surveys, tutorials, even animations and summaries as formative assessments. Because on the other hand, still you can use tests, your MCQs and your short answer tests and quizzes for summative assessment. In the applying stage, though, notice that still you can use for summative assessment on the right. Still you can use your multiple choice and short answer exams, but more on, because this is the applying stage, definitely more on authentic assessments where you would present your students with real world scenarios. Diba? And then, but for formative, you can make use of interactive tutorials and virtual labs and simulations and games available online, assuming, of course, that you and your students have the resources to do so. And well, as mentioned and as described by Dr. Sheila earlier, there are mechanisms already, there have been preparations already to address yung difficulty about this, the technology and online aspect. Then for analyzing, this one, pataas na tayo ng pataas, no? Higher order thinking skills in the Bloom's taxonomy. But if you'll notice from the summative assessment options, you can still use multiple choice and short answer exams. You can use case studies both for as formative assessment and summative assessment. Mainly because they all depend on the design, your design, and the mechanics that you will use, no? And tell your students. For evaluating, see from in this stage, the case studies and lab reports and simulations, they're just formative assessments. But the Multiple choice and short answer exams, they can still be used for summative. And higher order thinking skills na tayo. And then, of course, the highest level, no? Your simulations, case studies, and peer reviews just become pure formative assessment, pair, leading to, or which can be related to, your summative ones, your portfolios, your synthesis papers, your collaborative projects. So that's one way. Another way would be through reviewing. Another way of looking at the assessment options that you have would be to look at the continuum of assessment methods. Well, the point here being a continuum is that it's not either or. I mean, now you just choose one. The idea is you combine them from informal checks to the performance assessment, because combine them so that your students will be able to meet and address the learning outcomes, no, of the curriculum of your course. And you try to use these continuum across time. Mainly because the logic here is that learning is not an instantaneous thing. It develops as a result of ongoing inquiry and thinking, practice, exercises, and all that. Diba? So, ganun din yung assessment natin. So, through informal checks, your observation and dialogues, paano gagawin yung observation? Well, you'll have to rely more on observation notes and self-reflection ng mga students and all that. And if you can afford to have synchronous sessions, then you can do so. Then you have your quiz and test, your academic prompts, simply they're your preparation for the performance assessment. We won't, it's not going to be ideal that we ask for our students to perform a task and or submit a major output without academic prompts. I-ready muna natin sila, of course. Now, these are just two recommendations. Now, you go back to Bloom's and or you choose a balanced combination of assessments from the continuum of assessment methods. But it's really up to you how you'll redesign the mechanics. Kasi if you just need to go back to what you have from the face-to-face, diba? I mean, you won't scratch naman them out from your options. So baka may mechanics lang na kailangan baguhin, but the basic assessment design remains, no? And then baka naman kailangan lang technology, may specific technology that you can use it with. Or baka yung third option, yun nga, you may need to redesign totally talaga your assessment. But in any case, even though it depends on your actual design, no? I can offer these. These are the usual assessment mechanisms done online or which can be done remotely. First one, an online quiz. Ideally, all these 8 talaga, you can do and use them as assessment for learning, of learning, and as learning. But the pinkish ones, it may be difficult or more challenging to design them as that. Like for online quiz, you can use it for assessment as learning, sure, but it will be difficult for you to design your multiple choice question, for example, that will elicit self-reflection from your students. But the main point here is for online quizzes, definitely they're more inclined to be used as assessment for learning and of learning. The discussion forums, na asynchronous discussions, maybe through your discussion boards or even yung social media groups, pages, threads, they can be used for assessment for learning and as learning. All depends on the guidelines that you put there and the questions that you'll ask. And then so on and so forth. So ganyan lang yung idea ng simple checklist nito. In the succeeding slides, I'll expound on these mechanisms further and include a few tips and strategies, and then tools na low bandwidth and the medyo high-tech options, although not really that high-tech, no, that you can include in your considerations. Okay, first is online quizzes and assessment. definitely yung nabanggit din kanina, how may concern na how are we going to know if the students are really the ones who would answer a specific exercise or something like that. Now, I normally say this as an answer to that, na I'd like to think the number of learners who genuinely would like to learn and develop their skills and attitudes and behaviors, no? uh, and learn through the design, the activities and assessment designed by the teachers, they greatly outnumber those who don't, and who would just look for shortcuts and cheat. No? But likewise, then, if the students they would want to cheat and find the shortcuts, they will. Whether regardless of your mode of delivery, whether you're in the face to face or in a remote teaching and learning setting or in an online setting. Nevertheless, ito yung strategy for online quizzes. Whether, regardless of your mode of delivery, you need to review and observe the basic principles of test construction and the strategies for designing effective tests, regardless ng delivery format nga. How are you going to do that? First, you can do not lift directly from a source. So, in such a way na when the students answer, they can easily Google the answer. Kasi copy-paste lang nila yung question and then they'll find the answer already. What you can do is you modify your assessment task and your assignment or the mechanics for your quiz or the item for your quiz to focus on specific factors, local factors, personal factors, recent factors, which yun nga, they cannot Google easily. I mean, there is a processing involved first. Na they would be asked pa to further research or go back to the lessons you presented them and analyze and synthesize. Another strategy or tip would be that all items of the test or quiz should be independent of each other to ensure that there are no hints to answer in other items. This one's part of the usual basic principles na, di ba, of test construction. And you know this already as ano pa lang, even as teachers na nagtitrain pa lang. Third, make sure that there are no unintended clues in the items in relation to the second tip. Na your articles dun sa MCQ nyo, the a and an. Then, use a bank of question banks. If there will be a need for you to prepare one set for a specific set of students, tapos a different set for another group of students, kindly do so. Kasi that also lessens yung possibility na they'll ask each other na, okay, ano yung quiz na ni teacher? Remotely, I mean through chats, yung mga chat groups nila, di ba? So, yun. Next would be, you clarify your quiz protocols. This includes your your quiz behavior expectations in terms of quiz behavior, and then the test behavior itself. How are you going to do this, address this, yung quiz protocols? First, you can set a reasonable and fixed amount of time to respond to each item. If it's a quiz, if it's an online quiz, let's say via Moodle, kasi that's what we use for our learning management system. So, kung fixed lang yung time nila, they only have this certain number of minutes to answer each item and even the whole test itself. They won't have the chance to look for answers elsewhere and or ask their brothers and sisters, no, anong sagot dito, and all that, if they're answering it at home. And then second, allow only one item to be viewed at a time, and you shuffle the options if it's an MCQ. This one then, it prevents them then to take note of the item and the options and then relay yung items and options to other people. And then prevent them from backtracking. Now, if they answer number 1 already, they need to present to number 2 and they cannot go back to number 1 anymore. Something like that. There are online quiz uh, features in platforms that allow for this one to prevent backtracking. Limit the assessment time. This one's the whole overall assessment period. That of course, uh, well, you have to find a balance here. If the quiz, let's say there will be a graded or recorded formative online quiz, 10 item online quiz, which would be available from Friday to Sunday, for example, in your platform. And the students can answer for just 20 minutes, anytime within the period given na Friday to Sunday siya, pero 20 minutes lang. Yung mga ganyan ba. Or do you think that the period, the Friday to Sunday period is too much? If that's the case, the limit din natin. But we need to take note of, for example, if our students are just relying on mobile data, so ano lang, when would be the most strategic time na they have a consistent connection, for example. And then I guess in relation to the challenge mentioned by Dr. Sheila earlier, na what if in the case of those who will answer the printed ones? So we have to allot a longer period for that, diba? So that will also relate us back to the previous tip na we prepare question banks. So same topics would be covered. Uh, you can actually you can have same subtopics pa and even answers, set of answers, pero different ways of asking the question. So mas ganun yung pwede natin magawa. And then add the practice quiz. This one's if it's online. Add a practice quiz with unlimited attempts. So students can experience how it is like to take an online exam. This one's really important because it lessens the test anxiety aspect that some students may have, whether it's going to be online or in the face-to-face, diba? So through your practice quizzes, they'll be able to try it out. Okay, what is it like if I'm going to answer an online quiz, not timed online quiz, and with all these quiz protocols na given. Para I can prepare for the actual quiz itself and address whatever technical difficulties na magkakaroon pa. And then I can just focus on answering the items. Next strategy or tip. To establish your institution's honor code and policy and communicate this to your students. In the same manner that if you communicate your quiz protocols to your students, how the quiz will behave, the online quiz will behave, you also try to establish and communicate your code and your policy. For a paper, for example, what would be considered as a plagiarized paper? In the case of online quizzes, the policy, what kind of guidelines and policies should you have as a unit, or as a department? And if you have your online quizzes already, you have to have your comprehensive instructions ready for each assessment task, and then those detailed guides should be communicated to your students. Explain what the assessment would be for. What's the relationship of that assessment to the previous topic or subtopics kung meron. Kasi all these, yung pag-communicate ng policy mo, the honor code system, and your expectations for the assessment task, they are also one set of ways na they can get invested in their own learning. Then, by the way, yung honor code part, yung academic integrity policy ng university or college or school. Like, if it's a paper, well, should you include a statement of originality na this is an original work, I sign it, blah, blah, blah. O may checklist lang ba yan? Now, those are just few tips or strategies for online quizzes. No? But in terms of tools, so what are your options? For low bandwidth tools, you can do simple Q&A through mobile and chat And even the pen and paper test. I guess ito yung, as mentioned, this is one mechanism na pinag-aaralan at ginagawa. Now, the pen and paper test, it would be distributed. Baka may add-on component lang siya, because if as teachers, they would want to know if this is really the work of the student or if it's really the student who does the work. Baka may documentation aspect, for example, ng whole pag-answer nung test. But then again, it varies din the documentation, the kind of documentation that you would ask your students. If they are just low stakes assessment and used as formative, diba, your online quiz, as a formative assessment or assessment for learning, why would it matter that much if may katulong sila sa pagsagot nung test na yon? Low stakes lang naman siya. It's more of to help them, di ba? Gauge ano yung hindi ko naintindihan. What are the things that I still need to improve on, and so on and so forth. In any case, for the online tools or apps or software that you can explore, if you have a learning management system already, for example, Moodle has a quiz feature. If you're using Google Classroom or G Suite for education, they have Google Forms and you can use them as quiz. And then Edmodo has too. I mean, by the way, I'm in no way endorsing all these apps and software and tools. No, it's just that they are the most commonly used, or at least I'm familiar with them. Now, if you can afford the other online apps and software and subscription dito sa mga to, or baka may free trial period pa sila, you have and I think there are already numerous DepEd teachers who are using some of these. Kahoot, you have your game-based classroom response system. You can create quizzes there. And then you just need to use internet or online content. You have your Quizlet. You can create your quiz and flashcards there. Seesaw, recently ko lang din siya na try i-explore. There is a feature there that you can communicate with the parents. And then the students can use the platform to document their learning. But I'm yet to explore yung subscription fee and all that. And then you have Socrative. These are your this app. You can create exercises and games that would engage students using either kahit smartphone lang, or depende kung ano meron sila, smartphone, laptop, or tablet. Now for the next, you have your discussion forum. Here, the guidelines and or reminders that I can share would be, of course, you have to be comprehensive in your set of instructions for a specific forum thread. You need to be precise in the kind of forum questions you'll ask. You need to be prepared with your discussion plan and communicate your protocol clearly. For protocol, how long will the topic be up for discussion? Do the students have 1 week, for example? So any day of the week, pwede silang mag-post doon. Kung doon sa print, on the other hand, kung may mga print-based na set or group ng students, how long yung pwede silang magsulat, and then given the time na kailangan pa rin nila yung i-submit through courier or something, or LGU partnership. Then another dun sa protocol, how often should they participate if it's an online discussion forum? Enough na ba na they just post at least twice? So yung mga ganyang mechanics. Will the participation, because remember, online discussion forum can be used as formative or summative assessment, and even assessment as learning, diba? Will the participation in the forum be graded? And then what will be the assessment criteria? All those kailangan communicated din sa kanila. Those are your typical discussion protocol. For the discussion plan, well, definitely you have to, because again, another way of helping them get invested and monitor and be responsible for their own learning is you try, for your online discussion forum, you try to explain the learning outcomes for each discussion topic, or relate that discussion topic to the other aspects of your curriculum. Then again, the discussion questions, you have to be specific, the time allotted, and the criteria. Another, you need to take note of naman, o paano naman as teachers will be your roles. You need to take note of the varying roles you and the students themselves can assume for every discussion forum. Will you be super active and in monitoring the discussion, and even in participating in the discussion forum as a teacher? That's fine. That's well and good. So that the students can learn from your inputs in the forum. However, literature suggests na you need to, uh, in a way, sort of avoid naman over facilitating and commenting in the forum, because the tendency of some learners would be just to read what you have to say or your post and in a way listen to what you're saying, tapos they won't read others posts or insights, and or they will hesitate in posting themselves. So yung mga ganyan. Or will you use online forum as a venue for students to talk, quote unquote, with their peers, diba? And learn from their insights and so on and so forth. And then occasionally you'll just monitor the progress and the participation of each. But regardless of the roles that you play in the administering and implementation of the discussion forum, you have to communicate those to your students. All right, now for the tools naman, as simple as you just use your email threads. I mean, if it's going to be via email, then you have to be just clearing your protocols, diba? We'll just use this one thread, everyone can reply and all that. Or you use your forum and chat features in the social media pages. You can also use collaborative documents, for example, Google Doc, or any file sharing app. No? This one, the contribution to a graffiti wall or collage of student inputs. What you can do is you just simply ask your students to post their insights or whatever keywords or key concepts depending on the discussion forum, no? Discussion forum topic. You can ask them to just write them all. Then once you collect them, you make a collage out of it. Talking about the physical written papers na. So this is one option. Na the main point is that they're still able to contribute to the discussion. Ayun nga lang, here, there will be a challenge here. Once you collected them and made a graffiti wall or collage out of it will be the easiest way to distribute would be magpo-post ka pa rin dun in your learning management system. Although, pwede rin naman, edi i-reproduce yung all the, I mean, the graffiti wall, i-reproduce mo, distribute mo rin sa kanila, and they'll receive it physically. Then, in which case, they'll see other students' posts, no? Although, again, I know, I understand na it will take time and much effort. But still, yun yung isa sa isang pwedeng option. Now, on the other hand, for the online tools, apps, or software, again, if you have a learning management system, there are discussion forum or discussion board features naman doon. If you can afford online apps or software, you can use MyBB. It's an open source forum software. Now Comment naman allows the students to discuss an online document. So mag-annotate lang sila and give comments there. Or baka naman nga, yun nga, kaya ng Google Doc lang siya. And then there's Padlet. Padlet, it's a blank canvas where students can contribute, can post, no? So para siya yung online version, kumbaga, ng graffiti wall mo or yung collage, if ever. And then you have Galo. It's an argument, mapping, and debate site. Now for academic paper, these are the strategies that I can provide. No? First, you maximize the use before you ask for, oh no, it's 11:09. Before you can ask for the summative assessment, the major paper, you maximize the use of formative assessments to help you gauge the quality of the summative paper output already. Because you're going to be familiar, so parang in relation to number 2, use discussion groups to become more familiar with students and their writing. Diba? So ililink mo your discussion forums, especially those that are not graded or low stakes lang. You link them so in such a way that the students will be prepared to write the summative paper, the academic paper, as an output, and you'll notice if there will be a difference in the kind of writing that they'll do. So that's another strategy already. Um, Third, you make sure that the students know the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Uh, what is plagiarism for specific discipline? To provide discipline-specific examples, ano ba yung acceptable para sa inyo? And even, I mean, there are generic rules and guidelines anyway. Or if your institution can afford it, you can use online software. For example, Turnitin, just to double check, as a way to double check if the academic paper is plagiarized. The fifth, you can design application assignments, authentic assessments, and performance-based assessments, and have them submit parts of it as an academic paper or with documentation and reflection pa. Segue lang tayo, performance assessment. What is it? They are assessments where learners are required to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and competencies, either by performing a task or producing an output. And typically, uh, you have your tasks, you give your tasks to your students, and then you pose questions or present the problem already. And then ask them to conduct research beyond the content that you already provided, additional research. And then from all those, ask them to draw on previously learned knowledge. So relate nila what they find out and then to what they know, synthesize everything, synthesize the findings, and then before they can finally create the output or product or perform the task. This is the typical cycle if you're doing performance assessment. As a as an assessment designer naman, okay, how am I going to place them all? One suggestion would be through grasps in designing the assessment task. Grasps mean goal, role, audience, situation. The P has three, no? Product, performance, and purpose, and then your standards and criteria for success. So all these factors, the grasps, factors or elements, should be present in your assessment task, assessment guideline, so that the students will uh, be able to have a clear view as to how they are going to be expected to do the performance, whether task yan or output. Okay, balik na tayo dun sa tips and strategies. Given the current situation, avoid requiring the students to do and submit the paper in one sitting. You may ask them to report also their progress on a regular basis before asking for the completed paper at once. Kasi it will be difficult later on dun sa last slide ko, it will be difficult talaga for them. It will be overwhelming and be more challenging if they'll be asked to submit major papers at once. What you can do as well, I'm not sure how the extent yung kung allowed to, no? But you can explore how you may integrate assessments for the topics of the different courses in the curriculum. So integrate, how can we do that? For example, I saw this in the K-12 curriculum. So for senior high, this was in the curriculum guide. In the first quarter of physical education and health subject, the expected learning competencies are for the students to distinguish aerobic from muscle and bone strengthening activities, relate health behaviors to health risk factors, and recognize the role of physical activity and assessment in managing one's stress. That's for physical education and health. On the other hand, there's the curriculum for understanding culture, society, and politics in the first quarter. The learning competency stated there is that for the students to articulate observations on human cultural variation, social differences, social change, and political identities. Observations they articulate. How are we going to integrate an assessment activity that will address these both? If that's going to be your strategy in designing your assessment, what you can do is you provide your students a series of tasks. For example, you ask them to conduct an informal observation and take note of the kinds of physical activities of their family members, even yung neighbors if they have access to their neighbors. Because diba, they have to distinguish, they have to know how to distinguish aerobic from muscle and bone strengthening activities. So Tapos on the other hand, yung sa understanding culture and society politics, you would want them to be able to articulate observations. So here, di pa-observe mo sa kanila, what are the physical activities of your family members? Zumba, umaakit sa puno, akit na ba sa hagdan, naglilinis ng bahay, and so on and so forth. And then from there, of course, you need to guide them in your assessment task what their observations are through observation notes. Tapos, probably for or using discussion forum, you can ask them to share their notes. And then from there, they can compare notes. They can see now the differences, the similarities in the practices of each other. Diba? And then conduct further research. Kailangan pa ba nilang i-enrich yung observation nila by conducting probably a poll, an online poll, where other members or friends nila can contribute. Then out of those, they can write then a short essay. Tapos you can also ask them actually to have the reflective component of the overall experience. So ilan na yan, series of assessment tasks na yan, if ever, while still meeting or addressing specific competencies stated in the curriculum. Okay, another example, Earth and Life Science on the other hand, in which the students would need to state the different hypotheses explaining origin of the universe and origin of the solar system, and then explain the current advancements or information on the solar system. That's for Earth and Life Science. Pero there's this another subject, reading and writing skills. They will be asked, or they should know how to distinguish between and among techniques in selecting and organizing information through brainstorming lists, graphic organizer, topic outline, sentence outline, and distinguish between and among patterns of development in writing. And take note, across disciplines. So, what can you do? In trying to link them all and designing your assessment. Of course, assuming that you've provided the key information about the solar system for science and the origin of the universe. And then describe, of course, the different patterns of development and the use of tools in organizing or techniques in organizing information. What you can do is you ask your students then to organize all the pieces of information you've provided or they themselves have gathered if you ask them to do so, then summarize the hypothesis surrounding the origin of the universe. How are they going to summarize? Through graphic organizer. So in a way, they're going to be able to address the reading and writing skills aspect already. Then another, you present them with paragraphs or excerpts about the origin of the solar system and the subsequent developments in related studies. Then ask them to classify these excerpts according to patterns of development. Ask them to show a summary. Then, how are you going to show the summary? Ask them to present topic outlines. So, na-address mo yung both, in both curriculum, the competencies expected for both curriculum or subjects. Anyway, those are just a few tips and strategies. So, what in terms of tools naman, what you can do simply lang ay emails or forum or chat, social media pages, and collaborative documents. Or ito na, ask them to submit a hard copy, pen and paper essay, or kung hindi kaya pa nga maskan, as in physical na i-distribute and ipapadala. Kung kaya yung scan, to be sent via email attachment. Online tools naman, again, learning management system, if you have submission bins there. Other online apps, ito, mas nag-focus na ako dito for the reflection component. If you will add kasi a reflection component through guide questions na how they arrived, for example, dun sa final output nila na academic paper, you can ask them to write blog entries through different sites, through Wix, Google Sites, WordPress. Now, for the presentations na synchronous, ito assuming na both teachers and students can do so for synchronous performance and assessment. Few strategies would be that you ask them to gather information from the students and provide instructions in advance, of course. I know for a fact na DepEd, the different divisions, they've already done this na the information, gathering information from the students regarding their resources and what they can or cannot do. So easier, supposedly easier yung magiging design. And then second, communicate your assessment rubrics, the one that you prepared. Although, I guess this one kasi hindi naman na siya, it won't change that much from your face-to-face teaching, no, the rubrics for the performance. It's more of baka kailangan lang mas maging clear sa guidelines because there are technical aspects of it, of the synchronous performance. No? So, which can be addressed by providing mock sessions and clarifying your session protocol. Now, these are the tools. Ito, yung recorded demonstration, and then you may still need to upload. They may still need to upload and download. Baka medyo complicated pa rin siya, hindi kaya. Or yun nga, add a documentation of the process. Online tools, you have your video conferencing tools, ask them to narrate PowerPoints, and or use screencast. For multi-part course projects and e-portfolios, this one's related to, in a way related din dun sa use or maximize formative types before you can ideally score or grade or evaluate yung summative. No? Consider splitting assessments which could lead to the final projects. And then use nga self-assessment and peer assessment. These are the tools that you can do for simpler ones and the online. I will leave you with this one. With all those considerations and tips. No? First, it's logical that we would want to reduce cheating behaviors in our assessment, regardless of the mode of delivery. Pero lalo na, all the more now na for remote teaching and learning context. Pero as we do that, we must include in our design considerations yung what are the antecedents, what are the causes and reasons for cheating behaviors in the first place. And literature suggests na the first one is yung general theory of crime. Na the general theory of crime as one explanation for why people cheat or resort to cheating behaviors. They say, the literature says that it's a combination of lack of self-control and the desire to pursue immediate desires. So yung mga shortcuts na lang. Kaya nagko-commit, kaya nag-cheat yung tao. In relation to academic assessment, you have to lessen their perceived opportunity to cheat. And that's in relation to motivation, their motivation. By their attitude and perception sa academic endeavor. Bakit? Anong goal ba nila for studying, for learning? Intrinsic goals ba yan? As in personal mastery, development, to increase one's competence? If that's the case, well and good. Lesser chances na mag-cheat sila. Yung perception nila to cheat. Or mas extrinsic ba yung goal nila? Are they after more doon sa grades and scores? If that's the case, then baka may kailangan tayong, as teachers, there are tweaking or modifications in our assessment designs na kailangan natin gawin. Kasi what we need to ask ourselves, what kind of learning environments are we fostering in the first place if high yung perceived opportunity to cheat nila? And then there is the factor na cognitive offloading. That's the second one. Kung bakit may resort sa cheating behavior. Because the cognitive demands are overwhelming already. Kaya nga, if it's possible, if we can, we try to coordinate with our colleagues. Hindi naman natin babaguhin yung curriculum eh. Diba? I mean, we'll still refer to that and we'll still follow or adhere to the guidelines there. Kaya lang baka meron naman tayong, if it's possible, meron tayong malink ng mga assessment activities and guides. I'll end it with, para ma-lessen yung tendency ng mga students for cognitive offloading. What's cognitive offloading? They'll just rely on usually the technology to make things easier for them. No? Kasi nga overwhelming na yung demand. Now, with that, I'll leave you with a series of questions. In relation to the opportunities which you and your school have been exploring despite the challenges, how can you as teachers and your colleagues cope as well as contribute? And what other strategies in addressing assessment integrity can you share to the other teachers as they administer the assessments remotely? Okay, think about that, the answers to the questions. That's it for my inputs. And sobrang nag-overtime ata ako.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Kitchay. Sobrang insightful siya. Though mahaba, but marami siyang content. Very meaty po yung presentation. And importante na sana nag-take down notes ang ating mga participants. Medyo na nosebleed lang ng una. And pero pag iintindihin niyo po siya, lalo niyo siyang ma-appreciate, lalo mo siyang maiintindihan on how we could know kung paano ba magiging effective lahat ng mga plinano natin towards dito sa pag-prepare natin sa pasukan. So thank you so much for that presentation, Ms. Kitchay. Hold on lang po, standby lang po before we open the discussion. I'd like to acknowledge lang po that we have 8,006 participants here nationwide sa Pilipinas, and we also have internationally yung mga participants natin. Maraming salamat po sa pag-join nyo. And I'm sure yung mga nababasa kong comments and questions earlier before Ms. Kitchay ended her presentation, may mga tanong na along the way nasasagot na dun sa habang pinipresent niya. Kasi nauna yung question, then nung towards the end ng presentation, nasasagot na actually yung mga questions. All right, so joining this time as one of our panelists, together with Dr. Sheila and Ms. Kitchay, allow me to call Dr. Melinda de la Peña Bandelaria, who is our professor in University of the Philippines Open University, and who is also our chancellor in UPOU. Dr. Mel, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Miss Kat. And bumabati ako ng magandang umaga sa ating lahat, sa ating mga mahigit 8,000. Did I hear it
Opo.
right?
Yes.
8,000 webinar participants. Good morning po, magandang umaga sa ating lahat, and thank you for joining us. Especially for those who had been with us since our webinar session 1. And hanggang ngayon ay kasama pa rin natin. And for those who are joining us for the first time, magandang umaga din po, at maraming salamat sa pagsama sa amin dito. So salamat din kay sa ating director Marshall for sharing your inputs and insights dito sa ating topic for today, yung assessment natin. So thank you very much. I think SDS, Ma'am Sheila will also be joining us in the open
Dr. Sheila.
forum.
Yeah.
Dr. Sheila will also be joining us in the open forum, and with all of us here, I hope we will be able to answer the questions and whatever concerns that you may want to seek clarifications on. And at the same time, we hope those teachers who are also with us now can share their own insights and their own experiences when it comes to assessment in online learning. So, thank you very much. So, sige, tanong na tayo.
Okay. May we call on Dr. Sheila online? Check
Yes,
lang po
ma'am.
natin if,
Yes,
ayan,
ma'am.
okay. Then si Miss Kit Chai. Miss Kit Chai is still there?
Yes, still here.
Yes, all right. Okay, so let's kick off the questions. Ito po ay galing kay Martin Andrew Yuan Braganza. Tanong ko lang, po, pag nagka-quiz po tayo, kasi kung nagloloko yung wifi, pwede ba siyang ulitin yung quiz?
Sinong gustong sumagot?
Another chance, second chance.
Sige, papahingahin ko muna si Kitsi. Ganito. Kung quiz halimbawa, kasi po yung mapuputol yung internet, ganyan, hindi po natin yun mapipredict, ano? Of course, even if we give instructions to our students that for them to make sure that there is their internet connection is stable, or for them to have a backup connection, yung mga ganyan, may mga limitations din po yung preparasyon na pwede nating gawin when it comes to technology, specifically the internet connection. So, ako po, at saka depende din po kung anong klase nung assessment or nung quiz. Kung formative yan, especially kung halimbawa yung assessment as learning natin, yung diniscuss kanina ng ating resource person, and we just want to aid, yung as an aid to learning ng ating mga estudyante. Ang suggestion ko po is to give them another chance to take the quiz. Na-disconnect sila ngayon, pwede nilang i-take ang quiz. Pero yung preparasyon po natin doon sa quiz material natin. So maglagay po tayo nung maraming questions na pwedeng gamitin. So kung 10 items na yung kailangan natin, mag-prepare tayo ng mga 20 items tapos i-reshuffle natin para hindi pare-parehong tanong or hindi magkakasunod kung paano nila na-remember, di ba? So, ganun po, para hindi, give them another chance, ganun, para yung purpose noong pagbibigay natin ng assessment ay masiserve pa rin natin. Di ba? So, again, depende kung anong tipo ng assessment, ng quiz, anong purpose niya. Then, kung yun ay formative and in aid of learning ng estudyante, then I suggest na po talang internet, bigay natin. But then again, yung design natin, the way we prepare the assessment, is something that we should also work on.
Correct. Agree. So, kumbaga, dapat handa rin yung system na reshuffle ng questions para hindi yun ulit yung question, para at least in a way yung purpose nung assessment niya na-serve pa rin.
Serve pa rin, yes. So, yun yung
alright. Okay, thank you, Dr. Bell. One of our fears as educators is that students may ask someone to do their assignments or reports. How can we monitor that it is really the students who did the assignment or prepared the report?
Kids, you want to answer?
Apo, sige, Chansey.
Ka na dyan eh.
As I mentioned a while ago, yung linked assessment activities, no? You'll start first with your formative assessments through your discussion forums, for example. You get to have a view din kasi with the kind of writing that your students will have before you expect them to submit this specific report or paper. That's one. Another strategy, lagyan mo nga po ng reflective component. So on the other hand, let's say you have 2 or 3 discussion forums related to the topic of your expected report. And then the reflection component of it, the assessment as learning component of it would be yung process, the whole process na ginawa niya yun. Pinagawa niya yun sa iba, that's something that he or she cannot answer. Kung may duda pa rin po after nung strategy 2, documentation ng as in the actual process na sinusulat yun. Pero that's more of on the planning side, I guess. Dun sa first 2 strategies na din po kasi, through your, yun nga, how you facilitate the learning and how you train your students, mas doon na sana dapat yung focus natin before we expect them to submit the specific output na medyo mabigat na high stakes. No?
Yes.
Yun.
Yeah, I agree kasi I think it was also mentioned by Ma'am Kichi earlier that yung assessment kasi is something that you design together with the course. Yung hindi mo siya gagawin sa end or kundi kasama siya dun sa disenyo ng learning. Ganun. And yun din, I also suggest yung link assessment na magkakadugsong sila, you get from this, you get from yung ganyan, or you're building on each learning activities, parang ganon. So you can even verify kung siya yung gagawa to o siya yung gumawa nung nakaraan, di ba? So mabe-verify or mababalidate nyo rin yon. The other thing is yung 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 variation nung assessment mechanism. Pwede naman tayo magbigay ng iba't ibang assessment strategies, ganyan, which will involve different nature of participation dun sa mga estudyante natin. You can even try authentic assessment na contextualize, ganyan. So hindi pwedeng ipagawa sa iba, but it will require from us, the teachers, to know the context of our students para malaman din natin at tama ba yung sinagot niya dun sa konteksto niya. Yung iba talaga, kung nagdududa talaga tayo, di mag-oral exam tayo at magkaharap tayo sa video, may video camera and all. Especially if what we want to ascertain is the learning of skills. Yung ipapademo mo sa kanila. Then a video recording, or even a synchronous online session can also be a strategy. Pwede mo rin gawin na collaborative work, ang wherein they will be working as pair or as a group, ganyan. So puwersado na yung mismong estudyante ay makiki-collaborate or makiki-communicate doon sa mga kaklase niya. So in short, bottom line is designing the assessment mechanism. Yun po yung sagot doon sa para ma-prevent natin yung ganong posibilidad na iba yung papagawain noong ating mga estudyante.
Thank you, Dr. Mel, for enlightening us. And for yung fear nga po na nag-bring up nung comment na yon, sana na-enlighten din po kayo. Question from, and Ms. Kitchi, thank you also for sharing your answer. Question from Marwelin Kapuyan. For SDS, for Dr. Sheila, for modular approach, are there ways for parents to undergo same learning because they are the ones who will help their children in their learnings? What if parents do not know the subject matter?
Okay, Miss Kat.
Apo.
Okay. Doon sa printed modular, talagang nakakaproblema tayo doon on the assessment. Ma-check natin sa online, yung nasabi nga ni Ma'am Mel. Madaling ma-check yon kasi magkakaroon ng interaction. So there's really a big challenge doon sa modular. Kung paano nga natin ma-assess na yung bata talaga ang sumagot. So, nakikita nga namin na big challenge yun nung nagkaroon ng tryout. How will we do this? That is why nag-come up kami talaga yung plan B, yung digital file na offline kung walang internet. Tapos kung maidagdag ko kay Ma'am Ana at kay Ma'am Mel, kung sakaling yung internet ay hindi siya talaga strong at talagang pumalpak, pwede po ba tayong gumamit ng yung share it, yung isi-share na lang natin kung offline yung bata, ibabalik nung teacher or field coordinator via online dun sa teacher. Parang ang example nito, no, nagpasagot po tayo at gusto natin in 30 minutes sasagutan, pwede ba nating i-forward yung, kung sakaling wala po silang internet, ano po, may mapagbibigyan lang po tayo na may internet, siya na po yung mag-share. So, I'll give that in 30 minutes, ibalik mo rin sa akin yung sagot. Pwede bang gano'n na kasi yun po yung nakikita namin kasi pag printed po kasi, yung modular, parang ang hirap po talaga i-gauge kung yung bata talaga ang sumagot o yung magulang since wala pong face-to-face. So, ang kausap na po namin ay mga magulang lang parati at bawal talaga yung makausap yung mga bata. It will only be possible na ma-check natin, ma-assess, sabi na nga ni Ma'am Mel, doon sa online, kasi mag-collaborative dyan, magkaroon ng synchronous yan, ma-check natin. So, big challenge po yun na talaga ngayon yung team namin ay pinag-iisipan pa talaga kung paano gagawin yun.
Yeah, ma'am, si ma'am yata may sasabihin yata si ma'am.
Go ahead.
Yeah, ang magiging ano lang namin doon sa mga yung tanong ni Sir na yung sa printed just in case yung modular na mangyayari, magbe-base lang kami talaga sa output na matatanggap ng mga teachers, yung return output. So, meron naman kaming ginagawang mga rubrics na piniprepare ng mga teachers. Pero again, sinod ba talaga ang sumagot ng mga printed modules natin? Paano natin ma-assess? Pagka meron po kayong rekomendasyon, Ma'am Mel and Ma'am Ana, just in case, kasi hindi talaga online po lahat dito sa amin. Sa SDO1, meron pa rin tayong printed. Kaya medyo malaking hamon po talaga yon sa amin.
Yeah. Kids, may sagot ka ba?
High stakes po ba yung...
Yeah,
I mean,
actually, that's
that's first, ano po, di ba, Chansey?
Oo.
Yung po bang mga assessment tools na yon na we deliver sa kanila ay high stakes lahat, high stakes assessment? Kaya po ganun ang major concern natin kung sila ba talaga yung nagsagot.
Yeah, siguro dagdag ko rin lang dun sa tanong ni Kits, ano. One is we really have to determine, katulad din ng sagot ko kanina, ano yung purpose ng particular assessment. Kasi nga baka kaya ganitong ka-major yung concern natin, baka kasi high stake assessment yan, or baka yan na yung summative assessment natin, ano, Kichi. Kaya talagang kailangang alerto tayo, ganyan. Ngayon, kailangan nating i-consider talaga, and this is something that major consideration to, kasi mas marami tayong estudyante na ang access sa internet ay wala, up to none, not really that reliable. Kung meron man, hindi magiging reliable, di ba? So, kailangan natin pag-isipan talaga to. So, una, yun din, we need to determine anong klase ng exam, ano yung purpose ng assessment na ibibigay natin sa mga estudyante, so that we can also make the plan kung paano ibibigay yung assessment na yun dun sa bata. Ikalawa siguro is nalimutan ko yung ikalawa. Yung ikatlo is orientation. Proper orientation din sa mga magulang natin in terms of what will exactly be their role as our partners in this mode of instruction. I think yung isang tanong nga kanina, paano nila masusupervise kung hindi alam ng mga bata hindi alam ng mga parents yung subject matter, 'di ba? Posible po talaga mangyari 'yon, kasi kahit ako pag tinitingnan ko ngayon yung mga lessons ng mga bata, parang hello, paano mo sila tuturuan? Pero yun naman po kasing mga materials na ibibigay sa ating mga mag-aaral ay kumpleto naman po 'yon. Ang gagawin po natin ay supervise, hindi po tayo ang sasagot, 'di ba? Kailangang maging ka-partner talaga natin yung mga parents and guardians, and impress upon them the importance of their role in terms of supervising the learning, but not answering the exam questions or the exam papers of their students. Diba? So, kailangan, kasi at the end of the day, and ayaw nila itong mangyayari, at the end of the day, ang lolokohin natin yung bata at yung magulang. Diba? So, kailangan proper orientation tayo sa bata, proper orientation din tayo sa magulang. Diba? So yun yung ikalawa. Ang ikatlo, kanina na-mention ni Ma'am Sheila na we have to work with our community. We have to work with our partners, with our local partners. Kung high-stake exam yan, probably we can have yung mga volunteers natin sa community, and then pwede silang mag-proctor ng isang kapitbahay, ng 2 kapitbahay, di ba? Kung written exam yan. Kung written exam. So, pwedeng, kasi if I may share, nung early years ng UPOU, that's how we were doing our exams. Pumupunta sila sa isang lugar, at meron silang proctor, at doon nila tinitake yung exam nila. Ano yun? Sulat yun. Then kukolektahin ulit, ipapadala sa amin. Mailing pa yun nung time na yun. Isipin nyo, all over the Philippines, i-mail lahat yun sa Los Baños, diba? So may mga ganong cases. So we're just talking of community. There will probably be volunteers whom we can tap to assist us, and especially yung mga bata, ito narinig ko to Ma'am Kat dun sa SDS na guest din natin nung
The other day, yeah.
there was
Mga
that man,
gabay volunteers.
yung mga volunteers,
Yeah.
especially yung mga kinder up to grade 3 na walang kasama sa bahay na magsusupervise ng kanilang progress sa pag-aaral. So ito, even in exams, we can probably tap community volunteers. Lalo ngayon na lahat naman ay work from home. Probably may isang college student doon sa kapitbahay na pwede nating matap as a volunteer. Kung ako nga yan, I will work with the local, if there are local colleges, for instance, doon sa lugar natin, then probably they can even credit itong mga ganitong volunteer work as part of their NSTP community work. Or even recognizing sa community, civil organizations, ganyan, sa community. So that we can also tap itong ating mga bigyan mo ng tigi-tigisang assignment na bata yan, ganyan. Hindi man necessary na magpupunta sa bahay or siguro kumustahan lang, ganyan. Or even mga isa o dalawang isusupervise during exam. So yung siguro yung mga mechanism. Yesterday I also had a meeting with some of our project partners in Quezon. Ito yung sa Mauban, Quezon. And I was also, sa kanila mahirap din, especially yung mga island, nila, ay nasa isla ng mga eskwelahan nila. Talagang nagsabi sila na mahirap ang internet. So paanong gagawin natin? Yung mga assignments, etc. So I shared with them yung natutunan ko din doon sa isang eskwelahan, yung Dropbox. Yung maglalagay ng Dropbox, doon lang ihuhulog lahat yung mga assignment, etc. Kukolektahin, ganyan. So nakakuha kaagad sila na mag-i-sponsor ng magagawa ng Dropbox. Sabi ng isang kapartner namin sa project, o sige, pakibilang kung ilang Dropbox ang kailangan ninyo at kung saan natin pwedeng ilagay. Sasagutin na namin lahat ng Dropbox na kakailanganin ng basic education. At least yung basic education na nila, elementary and high school. So working with the community, for me, can probably address many of our concerns, even concerns about assessment. So yun lang po yung pwede kong ma-share on how we can address, especially if walang access sa internet yung ating mga estudyante.
Thank you, Dr. Mel. Thank you,
May I
Dr.
add,
Sheila,
Kat?
a while ago.
Yes, may I add, Kat,
Yes, ma'am.
on what we are doing in Pangasinan 1, ang bilin po natin sa mga guro natin, especially pag, example, magka-lockdown po, magiging multi-grade teacher na sila. Hindi sila yung pang high school. So lahat ng nasa tabi na nila, ituturuan na po nila. So yun po yung advice po namin ngayon. Kasi ang nakikita po natin dito, kaya nga sabi ko, every teacher is a reading teacher.
Yes.
So pag may hindi makabasa, dapat kasi pag lumapit yung parent at sasabihin niya, teacher ka naman, di ba? Dapat alam mo magtulong magbasa, pakituruan tong anak ko. So we cannot say no. So yun po yun, ma'am.
Kay Sir ngayon, na lahat ng teacher will be trained or as a reader teacher, and para siguro i-map out nyo na, kung nasaan yung mga teachers ninyo at ilang learners yung malapit no sa vicinity ng inyong mga guro. Yes sir, that's a very good strategy as well. Para talaga masigurado natin, kanina si ma'am sabi, kailangan lahat kasama, no one will be left behind. So ito na po talaga, I agree with your strategy here. Yeah, thank you very much for that. May natutunan na naman ako ngayong araw na to.
Agree. From here also, Dr. Mel. Thank you, Dr. Sheila and Dr. Mel and Ms. Kitchi for answering the question. And another one, I guess, dalawang questions dito na medyo related. Can you please give suggestions on how can we assess learnings of students with regards to MAPE, yung subject? So that's from Joy Carol Molina. And then the other one is about laboratory and clinical skills. So paano mo siya ma-assess given those three subjects? That came from Ronald Go naman.
Ma'am Kit, you want to answer? Kasi meron ka example nung
Yung last time. We have we have colleagues in the university na they conduct practicum sessions and laboratory, mga ganyan. So what they do is, nag-invest po talaga sila sa formative assessments muna. Like for example, if it's a lab, because it will be too dangerous. While it is possible na meron pong mga lab work na pwedeng through household tools lang, and pwedeng ma-prepare, uh, most of them, medyo dangerous po na gawin yon, no? And iasa na masiset up siya. So, nag invest sa formative assessments in the sense na through resources online, yung mga recorded na lab experiments and simulations. So, mas ganun po muna na nag-a-ask sa mga students na, okay, you try this first, you try this and or you observe. Tapos may mga guide questions. Yun yung role ng teachers. Magpo-provide ako sa inyo ng guide questions. May prompt ako. Ano ba yung kailangan yung manotice? May provide pa ako ng mga observation sheets and all that. Tapos ipa-plot lang yun ng mga estudyante. Tsaka pa lang, parang it's after such time, tsaka pa lang magsasummative na they will be the ones talaga to conduct the assessments and all. Lalo po ngayon sa case natin. Kaya po, again, babalik po ulit tayo dun sa pagbabalance and restructure ng assessments natin in relation to our curriculum. No? Ano yung negotiables and non-negotiables? And by negotiables na yung kaya naman muna for now na formative, building on the formative assessments. Kasi yan, yung mga skills-based and yung lab, na sila talaga, if you insist na sila po talaga baka po hindi realistic na yun agad yung ipagawa. On the other hand naman, kapag wala na talaga po tayong choice na kailangan na matry man lang nila and all that, of course, we can provide guidelines as to how they will do that, and then guidelines on how they will document the whole process and what they did. Through yung documentation, through images ba yan? Still images will it do? Kailangan ba recorded? Or afford ba na synchronous session ng demo, magla-live demo ako? Kasi in our experience, for example, in yoga, doing yoga, in our PE classes, meron pong exercises na pwedeng recorded. Pinapa-record lang po dun sa mga estudyante namin and they'll submit or ipi-place nila dun sa kung saan man na channel or bin online. Tapos, yun yung titingnan, papanoodin ng teacher. Meron naman po synchronous na session. Yun na, yung real-time talaga na magde-demo sila and all that. Meron documentation lang na still photos. So, marami pong ways. Depende, again, ulit, ano ba yung negotiables and non-negotiables natin? Sa panahon po ngayon, and even yung considering the grading period.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kitchi. Thank you, Dr. Mel. Another question, how to assure the validity and reliability of the assessment using the modular speech?
Ano po yung modular speech? I think that's a depth-ed thing. Or
Dr. Sheila? Yeah, baka may sagot si Dr.
Modular speech, hindi ko pa rin narinig po yung modular speech. Yung validity ng assessment natin as to modular speech.
Yes, the reliability of the assessment.
Hindi ko po masagot po yun because
it's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Miss Emma Amor, you could send us another question po to clarify yung detail ng question po nyo. From Jennifer Garcia, any recommendation, ma'am, on how to assess demo teaching using an online platform?
Okay. Let me share yung sa language and literacy practicum po namin, no? Ito po yung binanggit po kanina ni Chancellor na linked and building on one activity to the other, leading to yung finale, quote unquote. Yung sa amin, we make use of e-portfolios, tas doon lahat yung mga key outputs nila for a specific period. Yung sa demo teaching, bago sila of course makarating dun sa demo teaching, may mga series of achievements or activities na dapat ginawa nila, di ba? From the needs assessment to the planning and all that. Pero depende rin po dun sa track. Sa amin po kasi yung demo teaching part, at least for our language and literacy teachers, we have a track na small class teaching kasi siya. Meron pong individual intervention yung pwedeng gawin. So merong case learner. Merong more on instructional design. So design of instructional materials po yung gagawin nila and all. For assessing yung actual teaching for the intervention track and the small class track, we ask them to record. Kasi po, remember yung sa amin po kasi medyo iba-ibang time zones. So, hindi realistic na si FIC, papanoodin niya yung actual demo teaching na recorded, na live stream or something. Plus pa, meron pong usapin ng consent. Kasi kung young learners po yung tinuturuan nila, although we make sure naman po na mayroong consent na ito, it will be used for practicum and all that, yung kung i-record and then mapapublish kung saan. So mas safe na po yung recorded lang yung demo teaching nila, accompanied by yung series of documentation ng photos with write-ups pa siya, and the narrative and reflection of the whole experience. So all those things po, lahat sila magli-lead doon sa how you gauge yung demo teaching part. Kasi lahat yun, aspects of the teaching process na ginawa ng mga estudyante. So, ganun po.
Okay. All right. Okay. For Dr. Sheila from Alvin Sario, with 7 subjects enrolled, that would mean 7 performance tasks. This would indeed be need the cognitive offloading. What should be done in the admin level to address this?
Actually, Ms. Kat, ang ginagawa po ngayon is the most essential learning competencies lang. Yung 100% down to 40% lang. So,
Opo.
hindi po siya ganun karami at meron na kaming ginagawa rin na class programs kung paano namin ituturo yung mga learning competencies, kung ilang oras, sa ilang araw. So, yun po yung ginagawa po ngayon ng admin. So, no need to worry for the parents. So, dadahan-dahanin naman po natin yan.
Oo.
Hindi natin sila bibiglain.
Segundahan yun kasi I'm really happy to note that yung move ng DepEd towards that direction, that talagang tiningnan nila yung pinaka-essential lang na learning competencies, yung hindi natin talaga i-load yung mga estudyante natin. And kaya napakarami pong trabaho yung ginagawa ng DepEd natin kasi they are really redesigning the whole thing. And para nakapokus po talaga yung pagtuturo dito sa tinatawag nilang MELC or most essential learning competencies. So, yun po, ang sa akin po, ang lagi kong sinasabi doon sa ating mga magulang, sa ating mga estudyante, yung mga DepEd officials natin, our teachers, they are experts in teaching, and they are really designing your remote instruction, be it online, be it just on printed, offline technologies. They will make sure na kung ano yung mga dapat matutunan, yun po talaga ang ibibigay sa atin. So, sabi nga, huwag po tayo mag-alala. Pinaplano po nilang lahat yun.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sheila and Dr. Mel. From Ray S. Mendanilla, what if in the formative assessment, the result lead to realizing the resources used is too difficult for the students? What do we do?
Ma'am Kitch, may sagot ka?
That's precisely the main point po of formative assessment. Diba? When you find out po na okay, too difficult, hindi na-grasp, ang dami pang key concepts na hindi na-gets. So you provide, that's the time you make adjustments, you provide additional activities and or resources na kayo na po as the content expert, hindi lihis of course doon sa curriculum na fina-follow nyo, ina-adapt, but you provide them with those the simpler quote-unquote activities and or resources na kung halimbawa grade 3 pero pang grade 1, I mean, well, what's stopping you from providing naman, di ba? For as long as those things will help your learners. So, adjustments po talaga.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kitchi. From Rosewell Alvar, mahirap po kasi i-apply sa grade 1 ang ganyang strategy ng assessment. Can you suggest po ng magandang tool para sa grade level nila? I think na kasama to sa mga presentation na
Mm-mm.
kanina na-present.
Gusto mo magdagdag, Kichi?
I would want to know sana ano yung mahirap. Alin po doon sa, kasi po napatagal na nga po ako, di ba? Alin po yung mahirap kaya for grade 1? Baka yung reflection component or assessment as learning. Because if that's the case, kahit po simple ano lang po yun na pagtanong dun sa student na grade 1 o anong parang anong mahirap dun sa kung ano man yan na topic. Yung ganun lang simpleng asking questions sa kanila, that's already assessment as learning. Tapos from there, makakapag-adjust tayo.
So, kumbaga yung sa pag-customize ng mga tanong, doon nagbabase yung sa kung anong grade level.
Yes po.
Pwede naman siya na mas simple.
Yes.
Alright. Question from Charlene Gorobat. Ma'am, paano po masisiguro na nami-meet ng guro ang mga layunin na nasa idea, lesson exemplar kung modular modality po ang delivery mode? Idea.
Si Sir siguro, sina Doc Sheila siguro sasagot.
Oo. Dr. Sheila?
Okay.
Ayan. So it's
Okay,
about...
ang titingnan lang po natin is that guided naman po ang mga guro natin sa different learning modalities. So, gagabayan lang po namin sila. As you all know, gusto ko lang ipaliwanag this, medyo nahihirapan din po ang ating mga guro. Kasi new normal po ito, bagong may mga pagbabago pong nangyayari. But DepEd, ang central office, ang regional office at kami po ay nandyan na umaalalay sa kanila. Kung sakasakali po na hindi po ma-meet or hindi po ma-meet ng guro yung idea lesson, so nandyan pa rin po yung paggabay namin. So ang lagi po naming sinasalang-alang dito is yung kapakanan ng mag-aaral sa kapakanan ng ating mga guro. If and when nakikita namin na kailangan po nila talaga ng assistance namin, ay gagabayan po namin sila. So as regards to dun sa different modalities na ating pinapatupad, what is important now is yung tulong na lang ng lahat ng community, ng magulang, ng LGU. Kung meron kayong alam, yung mga community natin, kaysa magreklamo tayo, tumulong na lang po tayo sa ngayon. Kung may kakayahan po kayo, tumulong na lang po tayo sa ngayon kasi napakahirap din po sa ating mga guro ang mga pagbabagong bigla at sa mga magulang ang pagbabagong bigla ngayon. So, sa mga teachers na nandyan, kung magagaling sila at meron silang ma-input, input na po nila ngayon at bukas po ang aming tanggapan para to accept all suggestions. What is important, ginagawa po natin ito para sa bata, para sa bayan.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila. Last question na po. Advisable po ba na i-attach namin ang answer key sa mga activities nila? Depende siguro sa sa stage.
Kung formative po yun, personally po, wala po akong problem na may answer key sa dulo because that's the point nga na self-ano muna kayo. I mean, you try it as a practice. Pwedeng meron po tayong instruction na refrain from looking at the answer key first, try first because nga ganito and so and so. Ito yung relationship niya dun sa objective para to invest, to get them be invested in their learning, no? Then, tsaka pa lang nila tingnan yung answer key. That's performative.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Okay, so last comment from Ernesto Spadilla. This webinar is very informative and insightful. Congratulations to Ms. Kitchi, Ms. Dr. Sheila, Dr. Mel, and of course, PLDT. I'd like to ask your last message po, Dr. Sheila, and then Ms. Kitchi, and Dr. Mel. Last message po before we end.
Okay, sa lahat po ng kaguruan natin, especially Pangasinan 1, magtiwala lang po tayo sa gobyerno natin, magtiwala lang po tayo sa ating departamento at ginagawa po namin ang lahat para mapangalagaan ang ating mga estudyante at maibigay ang edukasyon na nararapat po sa kanila at isasalang-alang po namin ang kanilang kapakanan, hindi lang ang ating mag-aaral, pati na ang ating mga guro. So kagaya nung po ng sinabi ko kanina, magtulong-tulong po tayo, we heal as one, we act as one, and in this time of pandemic, only selfless love can save us now.
Wow.
Alright. Thank you, Dr. Sheila.
Ang hard
Miss
naman to
Kitchi?
top. Ang hard naman po to follow that one. Well, I already gave naman po yung self-reflection and challenge, no? So I'll just let Chansey Mel do the final po na message.
Oo nga, para wala na dadagdag doon sa sinabi ni Ma'am Sheila. Pero siguro ang sa akin is we know and we recognize the concern for assessment, especially now that we will be doing this online learning, this remote instruction. Our students are not with us, and we also know the importance of doing assessment, the various forms of assessment, various times ng school year. So we realize and we recognize that. And but we know that our teachers, they are well trained enough to be able to handle this whatever appropriate mechanism or strategies being demanded by this mode of instruction. And at the end of the day, with everyone's cooperation, with siguro ako, I would also like to request our teachers to share their best practices with their colleagues para po mapagtulong-tulungan natin. So kung na-realize natin na, ay maganda palang gawin to. If, halimbawa, within the division, nagtuturo kayo ng science, baka po magandang nagsisharean din kayo ng mga resources, ng mga strategies, etc. So other teachers can also learn from us. So, and I know with our DepEd people, our officials, working very hard to prepare everyone, not only the teachers, but also the students, the parents, and also the community. I'm sure, tama si ma'am, pagtatagumpayan natin ito at malalagpasan natin ito. Matuturuan natin lahat ng mga estudyante natin. Maraming salamat. Maraming salamat, Dr. Sheila. Maraming salamat po.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Mel. I'd like to thank Dr. Sheila for accommodating us despite your busy schedule and being our guest today. Truly honored and grateful. Kami po sa PLDT and UPOU, as well as the participants here online, are inspired by your insights. Marami kaming natutuhan today. Kami sa PLDT and UPOU ay taos-puso pong nagpapasalamat. God bless you po. And Ms. Kitchay, we are truly inspired by the insights and best practices you have shared with us today. Thank you for your wisdom and time as well. Dr. Mel, again and again, thank you for sharing with us every time your brilliant mind and your precious time today. Grateful and truly honored being your partner in this program. And before I end and advise you on some guidelines, I'd like to greet Mr. Ramon R. Esberto, our PLDT Public Affairs Group Head. A very, very blessed happy birthday today po. All right. So I hope everybody had a worthwhile and insightful afternoon. I'd like to invite you all again here online on August 10, this Monday at 2 p.m., which is already our fourth webinar topic for our teachers as we talk about supporting our online learners. So, quick guidelines lang po tungkol sa certificates. Kindly note that the name you will indicate in the evaluation will be the same name that will be written on the certificates. Please don't forget to evaluate this event and answer the questions correctly. The online evaluation form will start receiving responses right after this event and will be available within the next 6 hours. Then if you find it hard to access the site within the first 3 hours after this event, due to internet traffic, it would be a good option to access it during the last 3 hours, which is around 3 to 6 p.m. today. As shown in the screen, You may scan the QR code or go to the bit.ly site indicated. The certificates will automatically be sent to those who completed their evaluation forms and were able to answer 7 out of the 10 questions correctly. All right. So that's about it. Thank you everybody, UPOU technical team, PLDT Angels, Annie, Leslie, Irene, and Alice. Thank you so much. See you all again here on Monday, August 10.